being invaded. That's right, aliens are moving in and taking over. They're pushing out the natives. They have no natural predators, and their reproduction rate is out of this world. We're not talking about dandelions. Sure, they're a nuisance, but as weeds go, they're pansies. We're talking about the real monsters of the weed world, the real illegal aliens, the ones that can take over your land and lower your property values, the ones that will make it hard for you to get around. They're ugly and armed, some with thorns, others with sap that will burn your skin.
Nasty stuff.
Noxious weeds are an environmental nightmare. Their roots don't hold the soil together, and they rob other plants of water. They push out beautiful native plants and landscaping. They create monocultures that deprive our wildlife of food, and maybe even poison your livestock. And if you let them get the upper hand, you'll have to fight them year after year.
This must be how they propagate.
There are millions of them.
One light wind and they're everywhere.
These invaders are looking to relocate to southwestern Colorado. Their seeds ride the wind. Some are carried far and wide by birds. Others float down waterways, then march along the banks. They're poised to outsmart you at every turn. Their seeds lurking in gravel and topsoil, just waiting for a ride to your property. Or hidden inside bales of hay harvested from weed-infested fields. Some grab a free ride as you or your dog walk by. Others hitchhike by the side of the road and wait for a car to pick them up.
All plants move. They don't usually pull themselves out of the ground and chase you. We could find out how this thing functions. We might figure out an easier way of killing it.
Meet the musk thistle. This native of the Middle East landed in Colorado about 30 years ago. Now it lives in every soil condition in the state. Musk babies live their first year as little flat rosettes. When musk bolts in its second year, you're way behind the power curve. Each of these adult plants produces thousands of seeds. The Scotch thistle is a beefier plant. Centuries ago, impenetrable walls of this stuff supposedly turned back the Norse invasion of Scotland. In its first year, it's a huge ground-hugging rosette. Then, blast off. It skyrockets the next season into a thorny monster that can produce up to 50,000 seeds per plant. The Canada thistle looks more delicate, but it's the one that should strike fear in your heart because its power lurks underground. An extensive root system spreads far and wide, hidden from your attempts to control it. Unlike Scotch and musk thistle, you cannot stop Canada thistle by digging or mowing or burning it. You know you've got an invasion of Canada thistle in store if you find tiny rosettes with straight up. Russian knapweed is a true Genghis Khan of the plant world, killing all other vegetation in its path. Along with massive seed production and roots that can spread 20 feet, it comes armed with a natural herbicide to kill other plants. You don't want to touch it. It'll sting your skin. Then there's spotted knapweed, a real rabbit of reproduction. One plant produces thousands of seeds that can wait 8 years to germinate. It also has a natural herbicide that kills plants that compete for its territory. In 1 decade, one spotted knapweed plant on a disturbed site can infest tens of thousands of acres. Spotted knapweed hunts for water far below the surface with a deep taproot, displacing grasses and plants with more shallow and fibrous root systems. An invasion of it can double sediment runoff and soil erosion. Then there's the terminator of the weed world. What leafy spurge kills is property value. Some banks in western states will not loan money on spurge-infested land. Some ranches have simply been abandoned because the spurge has taken over. Leafy spurge has exploding pods that can propel seeds 15 feet. Root systems are interconnected and reach down 40 feet. Its leaves have a milky latex that can damage your eyes and burn your skin. It's a very unpleasant plant to have around.
One day you just wake up and be like, okay, I'm going to go cut down the weeds today, and you'd be done. And now it's in summer project, and almost weekly you're going down, and you know, everywhere you walk around here, you know, you go on a hike, don't bring your hiking shoes, bring the clippers. No, that's the way it goes.
Hound's tongue is spread by seeds that can wait 30 years to germinate. And they have no problem getting around. Hound's tongue, you might say, invented the concept of Velcro with its unique method of seed dissemination. You don't want it in your pasture. It can cause liver failure in grazing animals. The good news is you can stop it by digging it up by the roots before it goes to seed. Then there's yellow toad flax, the little Napoleon of weeds. For years it was planted in landscaping as butter and eggs. But soon this marching monoculture escaped to coat the state. Most of it lives underground where it hides its nutrient reserves. It will push all other plants out of its path, and nothing will eat this invader. Its cousin, Dalmatian toadflax, is a taller, broad-leaved plant that also attacks native ecosystems with both root sprouts and seeds. A native of Croatia, Dalmatian toadflax blossomed from a $20,000 to a $20 million problem in just 15 years in Montana. It would love to do the same thing here in Colorado. And last but not least, the wolf in sheep's clothing, the pretty little oxeye daisy. Introduced in landscaping, it is proving an adept escape artist. The problem is that it produces a plethora of seeds that spread far and wide. Oxeye daisy now populates even the most remote backcountry areas, threatening wildlife habitat. It crowds out native ecosystems, and nothing will eat it. Before you plant daisies, make sure they're not oxeye. It looks different than its cousin, the non-invasive Shasta daisy. The oxeye version is more spindly in appearance, and its leaves are smaller and ridged with spikes.
It's not that I expected a miracle. I didn't think we'd find a magic bullet, but nothing, absolutely nothing seems to affect this tissue.
They live, they grow, they take nourishment. They have sensory response, they absorb and expend energy. No matter what they're made of, there must be something that'll interrupt their life cycle.
Actually, there are several different ways to kill weeds, but you have to know their weak spots to win the battle. There's digging, mowing, and burning, careful use of approved herbicides, weed-eating insects imported from overseas, and carefully timed grazing and revegetation.
If you can detect small populations, even if that is just one plant, one knapweed plant, and you've got a larger patch on your property, you need to get the smaller ones first. You can eradicate those easily because they're not as well established, don't have the same sort of root base, don't have a lot of seed built up in the soil.
Elbow grease is the simplest tool you can use against weeds that spread by seed. Musk thistle and hound's tongue can be killed by severing the root just below the ground before they get to seed. Remember to clean up after you dig up. Don't leave the severed plants lying around. Although they're beheaded, they will go to seed and thwart all of your hard work. County road departments and state highway crews use mowing to hold some seed-producing weeds at bay. Timing is important.
when the plant has grown up to, say, right before the seed stage to the bud stage, and you mow it off at ground level, you've introduced stress into that plant. And in order to reproduce, it has to grow up again and do that all over again, and it's drawing on its reserves in the roots.
Mechanical methods won't slow down those weeds that spread by roots, like Russian knapweed, which responds to mowing by doubling its shoot density. For knapweeds and spurge, you almost have to resort to herbicides.
You know, herbicides are just one tool in the toolbox, but we shouldn't be afraid of herbicides because they have been tested for their adverse effects and to show that there are adequate margins of safety for any adverse effects. It should also be remembered that the herbicides are targeted to have effects on plants and to have minimal impact on other aspects of the environment.
The key to safe use of herbicides is consulting an expert. Find out which herbicides are safe to use in your situation. Timing and location are both very important. Certain kinds of bugs can be your allies. These weevils are imported from overseas and tested to make sure they won't eat up native plants. They've proven pretty effective at chewing up musk thistle.
A lot of times the larvae will be in the ground on the root feeding, and the adults will be laying the eggs around the upper portions of the plant and feeding on the leaves.
Introduced insects have been eating on this field of leafy spurge for several seasons. They've stressed the plants and slowed the growth of the invasion, but bugs can't get rid of the problem alone. Here's a bigger kind of weed-eating creature that can help you out. Sheep and goats will munch down on weeds if you time their grazing just right. Livestock can also increase weeds. Overgrazing stresses out grasses and allows weeds to get the upper hand.
So many people come in here and get a 35-acre ranchette and they have no idea of how to graze properly. They take a couple horses and they throw them out there and they leave them there 12 months out of the year. And when there's nothing to eat, they throw hay out there. Well, that's called continuous grazing. The horse, the llama, whatever it is, goes back and it eats the desirable species over and over again, usually the grass, until it's gone. It never gets a chance to rest and recover. So what comes up where the grass used to be? Weeds.
The last weapon in your arsenal against weeds is to reseed with native grasses or plants that will do well on the site. Otherwise, the disturbed soil will just invite more weeds in. Noxious weeds know no boundaries. If you have a weed problem, everyone and everything around you has a weed problem.
It's aggravating. I mean, you know, we've been spraying, and we've been lawn mowing and weed eating and trying to keep it back as much as we can. And a lot of our quite a few of our neighbors have been actually helping us, and there's been some effort, but I'd say just as many people have done nothing.
Weeds are also invading the high country. You can spot them lining mountain highways on their way to taking over beautiful wildflower meadows. There, they replace the plants that deer and elk eat. They mar the scenery and can make it hard for you to get to or enjoy the places you want to visit.
First it starts on the roads and the bike paths and the places where we're getting a lot of travel, and then you'll see the spread through the wind and through the wild game. It's easier for us to go in and treat areas along roadways and open meadows that are fairly accessible where we can drive to. It's the areas we can't drive to, and sometimes the wilderness areas that are getting these weeds spread into them that are much more difficult to control and much more difficult to establish any kind of treatment program.
Weeds also sneak onto public lands in untreated hay. To combat this, only weed-free hay is allowed on national forest and BLM lands in southwestern Colorado. It's marked with orange and blue twine and available at certain retail outlets.
Well, it's not the end of the world. Not quite yet. There's an answer here in front of us. There has to be.
Feeling overwhelmed? Don't worry. There's help out there.
We in the county will come out and work with the landowner. We'll walk their property with them, help them identify weed species, tell them if they're going to be a problem or not. And we also have a weed cost share program that's available for private landowners.
La Plata County uses satellite technology to map our noxious weed infestations. The data is downloaded into a computer program that is used to coordinate everyone's efforts. Landowners with weed problems are sent letters explaining what they need to do and how the county can help.
Because we're from a different area, we would have not had any idea what to do about them. We wouldn't have known what was safe to use on them. And we felt that it was pretty important when you move to a new area that you have to find out what's good for that area.
You hunt and you search, and all the while the answer's right in front of you.